Hey friends, welcome back to The Health Hunt, a human, humble, and humorous exploration of how to level up your health. So if you're listening to this episode close to when it was released, it's Thanksgiving week here in the US, which means everyone's overwhelmed, overfed, or hiding from Uncle John in a guest bedroom to avoid a conversation about politics. So instead of a full episode, we're dropping a short, real-life conversation that happened totally off script and turning it into something too interesting not to share. Dan had a doctor's appointment recently that led to a super honest discussion about traditional medicine, diagnoses, anxiety, and what happens when a neurologist actually takes time to ask the right questions. We figured if we're having these conversations privately, you might want to hear them too. So we decided to hit record and share. So here's our little Thanksgiving mini episode. No deep dive, no outline, just us talking through a very human health experience. Let's jump in. But first, in case you forgot, the Health Hunt podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. We're not medical professionals, and nothing shared should be considered medical advice. Always consult your healthcare provider before making any changes to your health. So, Dan, do you want to maybe tell us a little bit about the backstory of the ongoing issue?
Yeah, I went in depth in this in my background, which is another podcast, but give some more context to our three listeners. Me, I have had issues since about 2020 regarding vestibular symptoms, imbalance, symptoms such as brain fog, sensitivity to light. That has precipitated numerous amount of diagnostic testing, some brain MRIs through the course of the last 4 or 5 years, and then some neck MRIs, and then most recently a neck MRI a couple months ago that shows severe spinal stenosis and some other things, some neuropathy. And I wasn't able to quite put together what the actual issue was with me, like what's really happening. I went to the neurologists, as you may know, in the audience, or Sandy, you may know. Well, I don't know if you've ever seen a neurologist, but to make an appointment with a good neurologist is like 4 or 5 month wait. It's like, what are we doing here? I have symptoms, and you're telling me, March of 2026 is when at like 8:30 in the morning is when I can go to see a doctor.
And that feels crazy to me. I mean, I feel like if you have neurological symptoms, in some cases they're severe and they're emergent. And so to have to wait that long,
yeah,
doesn't seem feasible.
I guess the other option is just to go to the emergency room if you're whatever. But so I actually forgot that I made this doctor's appointment. It's only when they called me to remind me 48 hours in advance. I'm like, oh yeah, I do have this doctor's appointment with this guy that sees 20 patients a day and was out for 4 or 5 months. And I'm like, whatever. And in the meantime, between that scheduling and the actual appointment, I went in to see someone in another neurology practice who had a lot of availability. So the irony here and the kind of joke with that is, and just administrative health concerns, is that if someone has stuff available, how can they be that good? Are they a good doctor, right? You almost ask.
Well, that's wild. Is that a doctor issue? Is it a marketing issue? How is somebody take 4 months and somebody else is available tomorrow?
Right. And so you start to think, okay, so I'm not going to cancel the specialist that has the major that I booked out, for 5 months ago. And I'm going to go see this other one. And I did. And it was as billed. She was fine, but she wasn't great. She didn't make me feel like we had a path forward. As expected, it was an okay visit, and it resulted in her offering me trigger point shots to relieve the tight musculature I have in my neck, in my suboccipitals, in my lats, and in my levator scapulae, or I think that's how it's pronounced. They're all super tight. It's like Groundhog's Day every day with these muscles. Took the shots, and for 2 or 3 days, it felt better, probably because of the anesthesia in the shots or whatever. But it just didn't do anything. Maybe you need a course of treatment for those shots, and I should be looking into that. But the other thing she recommended is just, go take a brain MRI. I get a protective nature to asking me to do that, but there's nothing pointing towards me going to have to do that. And me spending another $400 or $500 to do that. And so I just kind of was not unimpressed, but just didn't want to pursue a relationship with her from a doctor-patient relationship with her.
Well, I know it gets frustrating, right? Because it seems like sometimes it's just they don't know what to do. And so they just sort of throw things at you and it's a catch-all.
Right. So, okay. So that's that. That it is what it is. And nothing wrong with the practice or the doctor, but just not for me. And so Finally, I had this appointment with the gentleman, the specialist, and the conclusion of all of this was I was thoroughly impressed. Even though, again, this is all traditional medicine, I was thoroughly impressed with how he handled himself. I walked in and, he was well aware of my MRIs and my radiologist's opinions of my MRIs. He had read all of them and he was aware of them. And he took out this white notepad that was probably small notepad, but like, it was like a white notepad. And he had like a red pen and he began to like go attorney on me. He's like, tell me when their first symptom was. And then he would challenge me in everything in the timeline of all the things that I was talking about, from the brain fog symptoms to the imbalance, to the tight musculature, to the GERD, to the nausea, to the headaches, aches in the temples, like just, so on and so forth. And just asked a crazy amount of questions.
Yeah. So he's looking at it from a holistic approach. I mean, there's more root cause into that.
Right. He really wants to know what's going on. And so, this 20-minute appointment was a 45-minute appointment. And in the room was him asking all these questions, taking notes in like this unmethodical way where like, you just like, how can he even translate what he's writing? I mean, obviously he's been doing it for 30, 40 years. So he knows exactly what he's doing, but he had a nurse practitioner in there who was also taking notes that seemed to be working with him for quite some time. And at the end, he asked her, he said, hey, what's your diagnosis to the nurse practitioner? And she, said some diagnosis, and he actually disagreed with her. And he diagnosed me with what is formerly called migraine without aura, or migraine without aura and without status migrainosis. That's literally the diagnosis.
And do you know what that means? Because I don't know any of those.
So migraine without aura means that when I have my migraines, there's no, I'll use the word aura, meaning there's no like stars or like weird lights coming in my eyes. There's nothing super crazy that's happening to onset it. It's just a headache or it's just pain, and my imbalance, which is not vertigo, meaning I have this imbalance where like I feel as if my legs are disconnected from my body and I feel like I'm not walking straight, even though I am. But I don't have vertigo where like room's spinning or like I'm going to throw up or vomit. That never happens. And so it's just so these symptoms can go on for days, not the headaches, but like the imbalance. And then they just go away. Like right now, like as I'm talking to you the last 3 or 4 days, nothing, Yeah.
So that part's fascinating, right? Because we'll talk more about that later. But yeah, I mean, there's something very interesting about that component of it.
Yeah. And so, I'm sure Sandy has some interesting things to say about that. And that will, obviously save a portion for that. But the moral of the story is that, so the diagnosis is interesting because of all the neurologists I've seen, probably 5 or 6, maybe more, getting different opinions, no one has ever mentioned or giving me a full diagnosis of migraine. Not suggesting that is the absolute answer and, what this all is. I have a feeling it might be, but he thought it through and it made me believe that there is some reason to be mindful of this and to explore this further. And so the part where I became a bit detached was what he wanted me to do with all this information. And there was 2 things. He wanted me to go on Lexapro, 5 milligrams, which is a low dose. In that thinking, he believed that my anxiety, or like a general anxiety that I have, was a contributing factor to my symptoms. And we talked about that a little bit. So like when he asked me, do I have anxiety or am I stressed? I'm like, well, I feel like I have acute anxiety, meaning if someone says to me, hey, we have a deadline in 48 hours, get something done, I'll get overwhelmed in the moment and I'll feel anxiety, right? I'll need to take a step back. So that's a very acute anxiety. But like, I don't know that I notice if I have general anxiety, but again, maybe I wouldn't, maybe it's just there.
Well, I think if you're used to it, if that's the state you live in, and this is work that I've been doing on myself to understand that I was living in a constant state of anxiety because I was always worried about things that had happened in the past and always worried about. So it's interesting to me that he mentions anxiety and I, for me, that's a positive thing to hear that he's looking into, because when you first said he just diagnosed you as having all those words you used about migraines, I was wondering with all of that, those questions that he asked you, if there was a why. Rather than, a lot of times we go to doctors, and this has always been one of my issues, they just tell you what the symptoms say that you have without any sort of designation of like why you have them. And so for him to then address the anxiety is interesting. And like I said, I think a lot of people live with constant anxiety, and because it's a state that they live in, because their nervous systems are always on high alert, they're not aware of it. The acute anxiety, you're aware because there's a catalyst, there's a work deadline, you feel it even in a more somatic way. So it's a heightened level of anxiety, but I think the baseline level, you're probably not even necessarily aware of if you live with it all the time.
Yeah, no, I think that is, all those are very good points. So then there was another medicine you had given me, or you had prescribed to me, that's for nausea, which may be in line with like some of the GERD symptoms I feel when I have the headaches. And so, because headaches can cause nausea. So there's a chance I may take those. I forgot the name of the medication, but I am not inclined to take Lexapro. I know Lexapro does wonderful things for certain people. I have nothing against the drug itself, but I'm not going to jump into that. There's some side effects that would concern me, and I don't know that it's going to be the silver bullet for what I'm feeling. And so a lot of times I can reduce my symptoms through doing some myofascial release on my suboccipitals, on my lats. Like I could literally dig into a lat and I can feel the relief go up here, up to my head. Like literally like a release. It's a release.
Oh, that's cool.
It's pretty crazy. Again, not suggesting that is like what's going on, but like if you feel something that like feels better after you do something, maybe there's something to that. So moral of the story is that, and we'll have an episode about functional versus traditional medicine and just what traditional doctors mean in the course of just like your overall health. I was impressed by this doctor. I'm not going to agree on everything a doctor says. I think it's important to challenge a doctor or make your own decisions. But, when you're having neurological issues and you're having migraines, like these are things that you want to have a neurologist look at. But there's nothing wrong with doing that. I mean, there's other avenues I'd want to pursue as well. I was impressed by this. I probably will see him again before the end of the year. It gives me a little hope for traditional medicine. I mean, not that I'm in despair about it, but it was nice to see that a doctor really cared, took detailed notes.
Well, that's rare that they spend that much time with you, because usually it's like a cattle farm. They're just pushing you in and out, and they don't care about, they care about your history, but they don't even have the time to look into your history, especially if it's a long history. They typically don't ask a lot of questions, which is, just again, my experience, but that's a really interesting experience that you have someone that was really asking that level of detail, thinking about it sort of, like health is a puzzle. You've got to look at all of the symptoms in its totality and then starts to understand why. So again, I'm impressed that he addressed anxiety, because I think, I believe there's a huge mind-body connection in a lot of illnesses. And so I think a lot of traditional doctors are maybe overlooking it. So.
I think he also just is, I'm remembering one thing, asked me about certain biomarkers. I forgot which ones. And I said to him, listen, I've taken like 9,000 biomarkers in the last like 6 months from my functional side of my health practice or health, whatever. I can't think of the word, but I'm sure I have the result that you need. And so, of course, I pulled up my Quest and I already had taken all those tests and they all were good. And so, yeah, I think it's very important to talk about how good doctors are good doctors. There is a known issue with lack of good neurologists in any major city. Neurologists are always packed and they're always booking out really far in advance. I think in South Florida, though, I've generally found that any good doctors in any field are months out. And so, it's like, you book these months out and then like you get on this waiting list and then they call you at like 7 a.m, say he's got an 8:30, and all of a sudden like, you're just like, oh,
yeah.
So, but of course my dermatologist has all these openings. Yeah. That's the moral of the story is find a doctor that really cares and is really detailed, is asking the right questions, challenge your doctor. And you don't necessarily with, whatever they prescribe, you don't have to take these things. You have to know your own body and you have to be your own best advocate.
Yeah, I would say unless it's something critical and you're in the emergency room and it's an act now situation, really the doctor will give you information and you can take that and you can do your own research before you make any decisions. Research all the side effects and potential issues with a new medication. Do you really want to get another brain MRI? And what could that potentially tell you? I think we talked about this, but if you haven't listened to it, a diagnosis can be kind of a blessing and a curse, especially if you've had chronic conditions, because a lot of times when you get a diagnosis, you're happy that somebody has given you something that's wrong with you, but then you cling to it. And that can also cause its own set of problems because it either becomes your identity or your brain really latches onto it. It can make the symptoms worse. So you just have to sort of have an open mind. Go to a doctor, right? Use that information, rule out something terrible, and then just do your own research and be mindful of other options. Thanks for hanging out with us for this little holiday mini episode. We hope Dan's experience reminds you of something important. You are allowed to ask questions, to advocate for yourself, do your own research, and take your time before jumping into any treatment or diagnosis, especially when you're dealing with chronic or confusing symptoms. And if this resonated with you, share it with someone who might need a reminder. And if you want to hear more episodes like this, the real, unfiltered health conversations, make sure you're following The Health Hunt wherever you listen. We'll be back next week with a full episode. Until then, take care of yourself, breathe, and try not to fight anyone over the last piece of pie. But if you fail in that endeavor, feel free to record it and tag us on Instagram at thehealthhunt_podcast. We love a good food fight. Bye for now.